For instance, no Islamic person is any harder against drinking alcohol than I am. No Islamic person is any harder against smoking tobacco than I am. No Islamic person is any harder against adultery than I am. But there's a difference between me and them. And that difference is, I believe that these issues are better off if left up to each one of us individually to decide, rather than tell the state deciding them for us. In other words, rather than the state telling you whether or not you should drink, it's up to me individually, and you individually decide for yourself. Do you see what the difference is, folks? They believe that it's up to government to legislate these things and see to it that nobody drinks, and see to it that nobody smokes tobacco, and see to it that women do not commit adultery. Hey, I'm against these things myself. But again, I believe strongly these issues are better off if left to each of us individually. Do you fully understand what I'm saying? Now, you don't have to agree with it. I'm just asking if you understand what I'm saying. I mean, personally, in my personal life, I feel like I've outlawed tobacco, I've outlawed alcohol, I've outlawed pornography, I've outlawed adultery, I've outlawed a whole lot of things. They also I've outlawed gambling. But I've done it myself, rather than have Big Brother in Washington tell me, you may not smoke, you may not drink. I mean, don't get me wrong, Washington does not say that, but they leave it to each of us as individuals. I mean, I know a lot of you are not American citizens. Nevertheless, I mean, what I'm saying, I believe applies to you also. Islam believes that they should spread their religion by fire and sword. Now, your book authors will go tone this down and say Islam denied that they spread by fire and sword. This, you can't make a blanket statement. In other words, it depends on the time and the situation. Now, I talked to a young man from India who insists that the Pakistani people were converted at sword point. And if any of you know any different or know anything else, your comments are welcome. So he said that they came in, it's not good. Now, your book will say that at some generations, they were converted at sword point, and others they were not. In some places, some places they were converted by persuasion, and some places by sword point, or fire and sword. Muhammad, early in his life, advocated persuasion. Then as he got older, he changed his mind and said, no, you can't convince people by persuasion, convince them by fire and sword. In other words, force people to accept our doctrine. And today we have groups of Islamic people who are following Muhammad's teachings and killing persons who are not Islamic. This, of course, it's only been like during our spring break that our Secretary of State finally accused ISIS of genocide. Now, any of you know what I'm talking about? I mean, you're looking at me like, what's going on? Well, hey, this is Islam for you. And yes, they convert by fire and sword. Now, I mentioned Sharia law. Sharia law states, among other things, that adulterous women should be killed, that persons who convert from Islam should be killed, that persons who will not convert to Islam should be killed. Now, folks, I'm not talking about the 700s here, the 800s. I'm talking about March 21st, 2016. There are thousands of Islamic people, millions, who actually believe this very strongly. Homosexuals, they say, should be killed. That women should be completely under the control of men. While Islam believes in righteousness, they have no assurance that they'll get into paradise when they die, except there's only one way they can be assured of going to paradise, and that's if they die in a holy war. Muhammad is once reported to have said, I wonder if Allah is the God of Islam, I wonder if Allah will even have me. He didn't know if he was ready to die or not. But there's one way that they can be sure, and that's if they die in a holy war. And they are guaranteed, if they go to a public place with a bomb strapped to their bodies and blow themselves to bits and blow everybody around to bits. And this guarantees them quick entry into paradise, where they will have 72 virgins waiting for them. Now you're kind of, I've heard 70 and I've heard 72. Believe what you will. What you say, you're not 72, yeah. Are you hearing this for the first time, or any chance?
A little bit, yeah.
Oh, man.
That's a lot.
I really thought most of you might have heard this, but if not, you need to be hearing it. This is what motivates them. They believe that they'll have 72 virgins waiting for them, and they'll have, eternity and bliss and happiness in paradise. This gives them incentive to blow themselves to bits and take as many people with them as they can. And terrorist activities are making news now every day. For many years, like say 50 years ago, when I was still in high school, Islam was just another, we called them third world, backward places. We paid little attention to them, didn't notice them. They were primitive people. Like today, they're in the forefront of the news, big time. Now, they believe that women should have as many children as possible, and the average Islamic woman will have 6 to 8 babies per woman. All right, now, folks, where this is posing some danger to the rest of the world. As these people are fighting among themselves, refugees are fleeing, particularly into Europe. And as they flee into European countries, they will not mix in with the European population. And if they continue to have 6 or 8 babies per woman within about 50 more years, and folks, I have a lot of memories myself that go back 50 years. I mean, 50 years ago, I was getting my driver's license for the first time. I was a little bit younger than you are, and I was 16. I'm now 66. I'll turn 67 in June. In that amount of time, the Islamic population in Europe will outnumber the European population. They plan to take over. And they have the means to do it. Now, there's a couple of things, though, that might set them back. Number one, European countries might get wise and kick them out. But number two, there's something that just terrifies their men. Religion is spread from one generation to the next by means of the women. The mother teaches their religion to the children. The father is often too busy making a living. The mother imparts religious views to children. If Islam loses its women, and they are terrified that they're going to lose their women. You might say, how's that? Because their women will move into these European countries and get the idea, hey, European women can get driver's license, why can't we? European women can go around without their faces covered by a veil, why can't we? And European women can watch soap operas, why can't we? And they're afraid that they'll get the idea that, hey, European women vote, European women hold office, European women have jobs, European women are economically independent. And they're afraid if the European women, if Muslim women adopt the values the people whose countries are moving into, all is lost. Now, in history, there have been times when outside groups have moved into a place intending to take over, but instead the people will adopt the culture of the place they move into. And all right, now I've got to ask you, what I'm talking about, how many of you honestly can say you're hearing a bunch of stuff for the first time? Just 2 or 3. And then the rest of you, I assume I've heard some of this before. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
My son is military. He said in most foreign countries like Islam, the women are more higher up in control of the men. So when they want their intel, they get it from women, from the women of Islam. So say for instance, they are covered. If they want information, then they take them like maybe into a store, uncover them, and they come out like tourists. and
Oh.
they talk and give them intel. They know more information than the men do because they always are around. From what
Also,
he
go
explained
ahead,
to me,
go ahead.
like he
You
said,
remind me.
over there, it's very different over there, but most of the intel they get is from the women.
Well, also, what a lot of the teachers here have noticed, when we have a Muslim woman in our class, the Muslim women usually make top high grades, and the Muslim men struggle.
Yep.
Here's why. The Muslim women are not allowed to drink, to smoke, to go to parties,
Right.
to date, not allowed any of this stuff. Therefore, they have all kinds of time to study and get information. And the Muslim men are expected to observe all kinds of rituals and rules and find much less time to study. That's consistent with what I've heard.
Yeah, that's what they tell me.
But again, I mean, I've heard that the Muslim men fear the women.
The women,
They're
yes.
afraid of
They are
because
very
people
high
are
up
always
there.
afraid of somebody who knows more than they do,
Right.
who's smarter than they do. And if the women have the information.
However, if they catch them, they kill them. That's why they unroll when they go.
In Arabia, with the home of Islam, women are not allowed to leave the home unless they're accompanied by their father or their brother. Of course, dating is out of the question. Their marriages are arranged. Supposedly, the women have the right to decide that they won't marry a certain man, but a lot of times if they don't marry that man, they won't find a husband at all. But the marriages are arranged. They're expected to stay home and have babies one after another, oftentimes 8, 10, 12, 14 children. So the population is increasing. And again, conversion from Islam means permanent ostracism from the camp or death. And this is why they have to be in charge of any place they go, because it's illegal in any European country to kill a person who converts to another religion. But, and here's what's dangerous, we have found out in European countries where they are there in large numbers. This is not going on in America. In European countries, they take over whole communities and they tell the police and fire departments, we'll take care of our own fires, we'll observe our own law, keep out. And supposedly they kill people who convert from Islam to another faith. And the government of these places knows nothing about it and does nothing about it. And they're setting up their own little private domains within the country. And this is especially true in France. And I have heard it's true in Norway and possibly coming true here in Eastern European countries. And again, these countries are afraid to make any move against them. And they're coming out, they're leaving their own countries by the millions, particularly coming out of Syria. Now, another thing that could go wrong with Islam would have taken over the world except for one thing. They started fighting among themselves. And that has gone on to this day. Syria is fighting against Syria. Libya is fighting Libya. Egypt is fighting Egypt. And Yemen is fighting Yemen. Basically, they're fighting among themselves. It is well known, if they had all united, they would have driven Israel into the sea and drowned all the Israelis in the sea. But they can't agree among themselves, so therefore Israel survives. And therefore they cannot branch out and conquer the world. And this might be the one thing that might work against them. Anytime they start another program of conquest, their stated goal is to conquer the whole world. Now, what would be so bad if they did? All right, here's what's bad about it, where they live. Right? I'm going to back up a little bit. A few years back, I found my daughter reading a Harry Potter book. And I said, no, that's... Then I read another book about what should we Christians have to do with Harry Potter. And I said, okay. I said, it's okay. I wound up reading all 7 books myself, and I own 2 of the movies. Movie number 1 and movie number, not 4, or 5. Movie number 1 and 5 I own. I wound up liking Harry Potter. There's a line, and of the thousands of pages of Harry Potter, there is one line, and my daughter asked me, where the Lord tells everybody there's a certain fate that's worse than death. But what could be worse than death? All right, here's what's worse than death, folks. Forcing a person to live in a society where no scientific progress is made for century after century. There's no creativity, no innovation. The Islamic world has not invented anything in 1,000 years. The airplane, the radio, the light bulb, the computer, the wireless phone, or the telephone in general, all these inventions were not invented by Islam. If Thomas Edison, you may know, Thomas Edison was one of the greatest inventors America ever had. If he had lived in an Islamic country, he would likely have invented nothing. The Wright brothers, had they lived in an Islamic country, they would likely have invented nothing. Inventions are made by people who are free to disagree. The college professor said man will never fly. Two boys from Ohio, young men, you've got here a young man, Wright brothers from Ohio, said we're going to fly. And they did. The college professor goes down as being an idiot. I don't know his name. Yeah, I'm going to do this in the college teacher. Oh, yes. Well, he goes down in history as being wrong, very badly wrong. Robert Fulton, they called it Fulton's folly when he tried to float a steamship. He got it to working and right on solid. There was a man named Drake who said that oil can be found by drilling underground. Oil is underneath their feet. He started drilling. Everybody called it Drake's folly. They laughed at him until oil started gushing. Got him all soaked with oil and his helper. Fortunately, both of them survived it. But got him all soaked with oil. Today, everybody knows you can get oil by drilling in the ground. You have to have the freedom to dissent. Now, if any of you read the sample paper that I put on your webpage, the sample paper was written by a Muslim young man from another college back in 2008. He talks about how, the title of the paper is The U.S. Constitution of Failure. And he states in his paper that in our government, our senators sometimes disagree with our president. Now, folks, isn't that just awful? When a senator would disagree, he also says that we once even had a 4-year-long civil war. I got some too. He comes from, they have not had 4 years of peace. But he talks like, acts like, oh, this is so awful. Our Constitution is so awful. Yes, our Constitution allowed us to invent light bulbs and radios and televisions and airplanes and automobiles. Isn't it awful? By people who are free. Having said that, if Islam were to take over the world, all scientific knowledge would stop. If Islam had taken over the world, folks, we'd still be riding on the backs of horses. I've had students, if you want to disagree with that, you can. I've had students disagree with that. They stopped all scientific progress about 1,000 years ago when science seemed to conflict with the Quran. Now among Christians, we have places where the science seems to conflict with our theology. Darwin's theory of evolution seems to conflict with Genesis. Personally, I think evolution is wrong. Well, at one place the Bible says to Joshua said, the sun stand still. Then along came in and said, our science said, oh no, it's the earth that returns, it's not the sun that turns. But along came Einstein and said, all motion is relative. All motion depends on where you're standing, and all other bodies are moving relative to you or the other person where he's standing, and all motion is relative anyway. So it's correct to say that the sun moves around the earth once a day, because it's relative to where you're standing. Science changes. When I was a youngster, before my time, medicine was a lot of herbs. Then we got more knowledge and we said herbs is primitive. So we went one way. Herb medicine is primitive. We got even more knowledge. Guess what? You go to a drugstore, you're going to find a lot of herbs. We go back and forth, depending on our level of knowledge. We have to have the freedom to dissent. We have to have the freedom to disagree. We have to have the freedom to change. They don't believe in change. They don't believe in reform. Hate to see you leave. You appear to be so interested.
I am.
Okay, I hate to see you leave.
I have friends that
I know.
we debate religion,
Uh-huh.
Christianity and the Quran. They ask me, why do I touch my Bible without washing my hands? That's disrespectful. And I have friends that are completely covered up.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm interested. I'll be watching them.
Okay, I appreciate it. Make sure you, because a lot of the questions that I have put up here earlier are going to be found in the
Okay,
other class.
in the class,
In the
okay.
other class, yeah. Okay. Anyway, they've gone, like I say, 1,000 years without any kind of invention, whatever, any kind of change. They lack the ability to reform. Now, I spent 27 years at Lockheed. And one day I was talking to a man who's a different religious persuasion than I am. And he said, in our part of the world, we never had a Reformation. You may know, Europe had a Reformation one time. The Catholic Church had a Reformation. He said, where I come from, we never had a Reformation. I think, is that something he should be proud of? Well, I got something to tell you where I come from, Western Europe. We did have a Reformation. I should have said to him, no, I couldn't remember to say to him, no, you didn't have a Reformation, but you needed one. We did need one, and we had one. And it benefited us greatly. Europe had a Reformation. Islam is incapable of having a Reformation. Now, a few things now that, here's something that I say to all my classes. You may have heard that in this country, prayer rooms are illegal. Actually, they are. A lot of public schools, prayer rooms are illegal in public schools. A lot of public schools do have prayer rooms. Yes. They're not Christian. Christian prayer rooms are illegal. Islamic prayer rooms. At taxpayer expense. What they'll do, some of these, but this goes on in New York, it goes on in Michigan, it goes on in California, 3 places. And all I have to do to verify, all right, now my wife ran into one of my pupils one time when I was teaching over there near Powder Springs. My wife ran into a pupil, and this man found out her name was Cunningham, and oh, we had to teach him. Oh yeah. Found out he was one of the pupils. He made it A in the class, by the way. He said, we didn't believe when Mr. Cunningham said that they had prayer. We looked it up on the internet. Prayer, Islamic prayer rooms, public schools, and sure enough, it's there. The Islamic prayer rooms are set up in all public schools. Here they cost the taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here's why. They have to put down special carpet. The prayer rooms have to be oriented toward Mecca, and they have to have plumbing where they can wash off their feet and wash their hands before they pray. And they have to have 2 of them because the men and women worship in separate rooms. Have any of you, by any chance, heard this? Nobody in Georgia hardly has heard of it, because it does go on. And again, like I said, this young man said that we looked it up, and there it was. Islam prayer rooms in public schools. Which brings up a real peculiarity in this country about the relationship between American liberals and Islam. Why? American liberals believe that homosexuality should be accepted. Islam believes that homosexuals should be killed. And when Islam kills homosexuals, American liberals don't utter a word of protest. American liberals believe that women should be treated equally with men. And yet when Islam suppresses women and mutilates their bodies and tells people that women are property, American liberals never utter a word of protest. American liberals do not believe there should be any kind of religious expression in the public schools. And yet when Islamic prayers are taught by teachers to American students in public schools, liberals never utter a word of protest. What I'm saying, folks, actually goes on. American liberals believe that people should be allowed to drink. Well, I mean, actually, I mean, people should be allowed to. Not that I want to touch the stuff itself. But when Islam kills a drunkard, the American liberals never heard a single word of protest. It makes you wonder if there's not some kind of a secret affinity between the two groups. That they're actually different horns on the same beast. And the horns, I mean, we were taught when I was in school, we have the extreme left, the extreme right, but oftentimes the extreme left and the extreme right will come together, and the extreme left and the extreme right are close to each other, then either of them are close to the center. If you think that through, you might realize more about what I'm saying. All right. Islamic people believe that they should make a pilgrimage, if at all possible, to Mecca. Their capital is Mecca in Arabia. They should go to Mecca at least once in a lifetime. They go to Mecca, and sometimes they get out of hand, and hundreds of thousands, thousands stampeded to death. This has happened several times in my own lifetime, including folk just about 6 months ago. A bunch of Islamic people went to Mecca, and they started trampling each other, overcrowded. And the Arabian government has been accused of not caring enough, of not putting enough barricades to keep the people, separate them somewhat. But nevertheless, one of the requirements of Islam is you should go to Mecca at least once in your lifetime. Islamic people pray 5 times a day, which I believe is one reason why Islamic men cannot make good grades. They're too busy spending too much time. They pray always with a face toward Mecca. Now, I don't know which way Mecca is from this classroom, but if any of you happens to know, I'd be welcome to be enlightened. But they look toward Mecca. I think it is back that way, and I'll tell you why. We had an Islamic teacher here, he would go to a certain classroom every day, and I have to be, he didn't mind that I was in there. I was waiting for my class to begin. I was working at Lockheed, so I'd come here early, because my class began at 7, so I'd be here early. And I'd go to one of the empty classrooms. He'd come in and he'd turn his face in this direction and pray. I'm not knocking for praying, but nevertheless, they pray 5 times a day with a face toward Mecca. They start their first prayer. They carry along 2 pieces of thread or a similar color. But you have to have a certain amount of light to tell which one's which. When they can tell the difference, when there's enough sunlight where they can tell this thread's this color, this one's this, then it's time to pray. But when there's not enough light, well, it's not time yet. So they wait. And again, when possible, they'll pray on a rug. And of course, they'll wash their feet before they do so. Take off their shoes, wash their feet. The men and women worship separately. Again, some of their taboos between men and women may seem strange to we Americans. They believe that women should be dressed in extreme modesty, with everything covered, and the whole purpose is to try to keep down lust. I got something to tell them. Many years ago, some Christian men decided they were not going to have anything to do with women. They go off in the desert, live all alone. They were called hermits. A hermit is a person who lives alone for religious reasons. And take note of this. I think you'll see it when you find our example. They were called hermits. And they found out that they could not live because all they could think about was all the pretty girls they had seen in the big cities they visited, all these girls they'd seen in Rome. And even though they hadn't seen a woman maybe in years, that's a lot of what they thought about. You're not going to escape it. It's your natural, normal desires. So why not accept yourself the way you are? But they try to imagine that if they insist that their women be completely covered over, where they can't show their faces, that they will not think lustful thoughts. I cannot agree with them less. All right. Let's see. The United States Constitution says that leaders should be chosen by popular vote of the people. Islam basically does not describe how a leader gets elected. Here's the problem that Islam has had. Your leader dies, and everybody who's powerful for miles around gets his army together and starts fighting until whoever's left, when the fighting is over, he becomes a leader. This is what they have done for more than 1,000 years. In our Constitution, we have the office of Vice President, so that when the President dies or resigns, the Vice President has always taken over automatically. He becomes President. In Islam, they have a series of fights usually. And whoever gets the loss of most blood, or whoever survives when all the killing and assassination is over with, he becomes a leader. He'll rule for maybe a good many years until he dies. And then once he dies, nobody knows who's going to take over. Big difference, folk. Let's see. Another area, the United States Constitution guarantees freedom to disagree, freedom to dissent, freedom to disagree with your president, freedom for your wife to disagree with her husband. Islam says everybody must follow the leader. The children must follow their parents, particularly the father, and even the younger brother. We had a bombing in Boston 3 years ago, Boston Marathon bomber, where the younger brother was the only one who survived. The older one was shot by cops and run over by his younger brother. And the younger brother said, I was taught in my religion I had to do what my older brothers said to do this, I did it. Basically what they did, they took a pressure cooker, filled it with explosives, set the pressure cooker in a backpack, put the backpack down and ran off and used the cell phone to trigger the pressure cooker. You haven't heard about this. This was the Boston Marathon bombing of 2013. He said, I was told I had to do what my older brother said. It was, the word Islam in one word means submission. So Islam is the opposite of freedom. Freedom to dissent, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Among other things, freedom to marry whom you choose. In Islam, again, your marriages are arranged by your parents. Women are guaranteed the right to vote. In Islam, women are considered property. Now, folk, I heard this one time, that Muhammad did not even believe that women had a soul and women would not go to paradise. There's 72 virgins that a person will get for dying in a holy war were special creations. They were not going to be alive longer. Basically, they were, I'd say, mind-numbed zombies who had no choice in who they married because they were zombies anyway. I mean, that's the impression I get. All right. Those are some of the differences between the United States Constitution. And of course, if you thought about it more, you might even think of more. All right. Games of chance. Yeah, Islamic people generally don't play cards and don't roll dice. These things can be habit-forming, can be addictive, but folk, again, I think they're better off left to each of us individually to decide and not decided by the state or by Big Brother looking down over his shoulder and saying, no, you may not roll dice, no, you may not play cards. Yes?
Is that the fifth one?
That's not the fifth one, no. Actually, let's see, how many did I name now? No freedom of religion, no freedom of speech, must always obey your overlords. Let's see. Oh yeah, well, also the idea that the adulteresses should be killed, homosexuals should be killed. Those are differences. The United States Constitution does not call that out. Women, now in some places in Islamic countries, they are giving women the right to vote. But it's a sham. Generally, the women vote alongside their husbands and are not free to make their own choices. So there again, there are several other differences. All right. Now, as you read about Islam, you'll find that they started out here in Arabia and spread throughout North Africa. There's something that you won't see in most history books. Islamic soldiers or Islamic warriors have fought really well when fighting in the open desert on horseback, where they can swoop down an enemy. The Islamic way of fight would not do very well in the jungles of Vietnam or in the jungles of Africa. Islam has spread in areas of the world where there are few trees. Get them in an area of the world where there's bush, underbrush, trees. They don't do very well. They went to India, and in this part of India here, Pakistan, they conquered Pakistan, and they still have it. But then they went on into India where there's more vegetation, and somehow vegetation in Islam, well, it's not just somehow, it's just simply their type of fighting, where they would swoop down, gallop on their horses on an open desert. That does not do well in areas where there's lots of bushes, lots of trees, and especially it doesn't do well in jungles. No, Islam never got Vietnam. Islam was stopped in India. Islam was stopped here in Spain. And they tried to get through Europe. They got through Turkey. Okay, that's where you can fight the way they used to. Then they got into Europe. They were stopped largely here in the Balkan regions. Eventually, Europeans largely drove them, at least not out, but from being in charge. Now, Spain, that's a different case. The Spanish, they conquered much of Spain for a while. The Spanish spent 700 years trying to drive them out, and finally they did. The king and queen who did so was Ferdinand and Isabella. Have any of you heard of Ferdinand and Isabella in another context? These were the kings and queens who gave Christopher Columbus his 3 ships to cross the Atlantic and discover America. But before they did so, they first drove the Muslims out of Spain. Now, the Muslims say that any country we once had is always ours, so the Muslims say Spain is still ours. And today, Spain has allowed the Muslims to move back in, with results the Muslims intend to take over. All right. Spent a good deal of time on Muslims. Again, that's going to be half the test. A few other things I want to say about, first of all, the first chapter is about the American Indians. Be advised that the American Indians that Columbus first found when he came over in 1492 were the Arawak, A-R-A-W-A-K. Today, the Arawak Indians are largely extinct. The Spaniards went on and found a civilization here in Mexico called the Aztecs. Now, folk, there are persons who will say that the European did the Indians wrong. I mean, the land was the Indians, but I'm going to ask you something. If you had been part of Cortez's group, and you had been near Montezuma's temple, and you would have heard some hideous screams coming from the temple, and you were told these are persons we are offering as a sacrifice to the sun god, what would you do? I mean, none of us know what we do, but I will tell you what Cortez did. He conquered Montezuma and put a stop to the sacrifices. He wound up imprisoning Montezuma. Then he got as many Indians as he could on his side. I mean, he and his 200 men could never conquer Montezuma by himself. He found out the Indians were in a state of rebellion, so he said to him, I'll help you defeat the Aztecs. He got as many Indians as he could on his side, and with his army that was mostly Indians. He conquered Montezuma and stopped the sacrifice. The Spaniards went on to Peru and found the Incas. The Incas were doing the same thing, offering human sacrifice. The Spaniards went in and conquered them. No. The Spaniards believed that they were fully justified in doing so because they said these people are heathen, these people are demonic, these people are devilish. So we believe that it's our duty to conquer them, to civilize them. This is the way people behave, by the way, folks, all down through the ages. Conquest was once looked on as being a virtue until about 120 years ago. If you study American history, you might pick up on it. In the 1800s, the nations of the world, the Europe were conquering. Britain conquered the Middle East here. Britain conquered South Africa. Portugal conquered much of the shoreline of Africa. Spain conquered much of Latin America. I mean, Europeans were engaging in program conquest. Then in the 1898, the United States got involved. The United States conquered the Philippines. The United States conquered Puerto Rico. The United States conquered a bunch of islands in the Pacific. And the rest of the world pointed an accusing finger at America and said, naughty, naughty imperialists. We're doing what you've been doing all along. Oh, we now know better. We don't do that anymore, but you are starting to do, point an accusing finger at America, and the United States had to live with the title of imperialist for the next 100 years because when the communists took over Russia, they called us capitalists among other, imperialists among other. But okay, we quit conquering. So these people we no longer conquer, what do they come and do to us? They come and terrorize us, blow us to bits and themselves with us. We don't conquer anymore. The people whom you don't conquer will wind up conquering you if you're not careful. This is why our ancestors looked on conquest as being a virtue. All right. Anyway, were the American Indians done dirty? Back in 2003, I had a long discussion with the class, and afterwards, one of the people said it was the best discussion I ever had. Was it morally right? Here's one side of the issue. Europeans moved into North America and took over. Then Europeans developed the richest, best society man has ever seen. They began to stop diseases like smallpox, typhoid fever. They built the airplane, the automobile, the telephone, the telegraph, the computer. Would the American Indians have done any of this if they still had the land? Highly, highly likely not. They're becoming extinct. The average American Indian living in North, we know this from studying their bodies, their bones, it's left. The average American Indian lived 18 years. The average American Indian woman only had one baby per woman. Their population was fast declining. A disease that they probably got from the Europeans. I mean, it's known that before Columbus, European traders and fishermen came across the Atlantic and probably spread smallpox and typhus to the American Indians, and they were dying out in droves. It is highly likely that if the Europeans had not come over, the Indians would have died from extinction. We saved them from extinction, folks. Before the white man came, I mean long before, they were mound builders, they were civilized, they were traders, they traded, they built magnificent cities, and as time went on, they declined and declined and declined. What was their problem? I think here's what I think the problem was. They were communist. They lived in communes. That's where the word communist comes from. We call them villages. In an American Indian village, there was no upper classes, there were no class distinctions. Everybody was the same class. There was no money, no private property, nobody was rich, nobody was poor, and everybody got fed, even the people who didn't work. They fed everybody. The hard-working industrialists got the same as the non, and what was the result? Their cultural level went down, down, down to zero. This is why I'm against communism for one, among other reasons. They were communist. All right. Leaving that, again, you can find more about what I think about the Indians by listening to the videos that I put on the other class. Africa. All right, one point I really want to make about Africa, folks, and this, you might see it on the test. One point I want to make. Africa was more involved in man's affairs than we realized. They traded with India, they traded with far off China, they traded with the East Indies Islands, and a lot of Africa's iron found its way across the desert. And if Sir Lancelot ever lived, he might not have known that his iron armor and iron helmet and iron sword possibly came from Africa. Africa has more natural resources than any other continent on the face of the earth. It has iron, it has tin, it has gold, it has diamonds, ivory, more natural resources than any other place on the face of the earth. But like the American Indians, the people of Africa, their civilizations slowly declined until by the time that the Portuguese sailors began sailing around Africa, they began to look on them as being primitive. But they were more involved with world trade than what we realized. Something else that a lot of students are surprised to hear, Africans did have the xylophone. You know, with an instrument where you beat on it and it makes different notes. Africa had the xylophone. They also had a drum. African music is a lot of times religious in nature. African art also is usually religious in nature. Their art oftentimes featured heads, not real heads. I mean, they would make sculptured heads with distinct African features. Their music also has a heavy beat. The drum, the xylophone. The world's largest desert is the Sahara Desert. Now, something about it, it's believed by most anthropologists that mankind originated right here in the jungles of Kenya in East Africa near Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is where the Nile River originates. It starts out in Lake Victoria and then flows up north through the Sudan and through Egypt. Lake Victoria. In the Kenya region, this is where it's believed by many that mankind originated. Oh yeah, another name for grassland is savanna. Here in Georgia, we have a city named Savannah. Savannah is a word for tall grasses. When I say tall grasses, these grasses are so thick that if you're ever near a savanna, a real savanna, don't ever enter the grass unless you've had proper training. You can put out your hand and can't even see your hand for the grass. You go in and no time flat, you're lost, hopelessly lost. Again, only if you've had training should you go in, because you will get lost bad. The grasses are taller than you are, taller than humans are. And you will lose your way unless you're really trained. It is known that humans cannot walk a straight line unless they actually have, they taught us when I was in the Army. Pick out a tree and walk straight toward that tree, and then pick out another tree that's in line with where you were, and walk toward that, and pick out an object and walk toward that object, because if you just try walking, you're going to wind up in a few hours right back where you started if you don't realize you're walking with one foot taking a bigger step than the other, and you're going to wind up walking in a circle. So make sure you're walking in a straight line by picking out an object, walk toward that object. Again, the point I'm trying to make is if you ever get in these grasslands, unless you've had training, you're lost. Unless you take a trained dog with you, a trained dog can find his way back. Humans can't. Of course, the other problem is the snakes. You'll never see the snake. You might see it. Really, really thick. All right. Okay, before I leave, this is, again, a hybrid course. You have to dig up your own. Anybody have any questions, comments? I've scratched the surface. I go into much more detail in my lectures online. The other class will have a lesson on Islam today, a lesson on Africa on Wednesday, and you can listen to those and get in more detail what I've said. And anybody, any questions, comments? They'll take their test, by the way, on Monday, the same day you will. Oh, there is no pass. The pass is over. All right. For those of you who've taken it, now if you have not taken 3 passes, all right, all of you know, check your grades on iCollege. Make sure you've taken 3 tests to this point and 3 passes. If you haven't, see me. We've worked with time where you can make them up. All right. Everybody else? Okay. Yes. Oh, man, I'm so glad you asked that. I do have my syllabus right here in front of me. I'm so glad you asked that. The papers. I made mention of papers earlier. All right, the paper is due April 13. You know, that's coming on as fast. So this is March 21st. April 13, and I've got to make sure that you can turn them in as per instruction. Papers are due April 13. And again, I have 2 samples, one of which I made reference to in class. By the way, I did not knock off points for that student in partial opinions, which I couldn't disagree with more. I only knocked off points for grammar and predominant content. Yeah, papers due April 13th. For early credit, turn them in by April 6th. All right, everybody, hopefully you all have good luck on the next test. I'll see you on Monday.
You said papers could be on any topic.
Any topic that has to do with world history up to the year 1500. Now, if you write about Napoleon, I'm trying to say I'm going to knock off points. He's after 1500. I mean, I had a student last year write last month about Napoleon. I'm going to knock off points there. Up to the year 1500. What's that? 100. I put down 120 points for you. Yes, I remember. Here's why. Here's why. You were somebody else. And if I had not put a curve on that, I did. I'd have not given you the next grade behind you in 80. That is true. I remember clearly. You actually made, you only missed 3 questions. Now, I did not bring the test in. I'm going to be honest with you. I have quite forgot to bring it in. Maybe I'll bring it in next week and show it to you before you take the next one. But in your case, it was a multiple choice test. I ran it through the Scantron machine. 30 questions, you had something. Now, 33 questions, you had 30 of them right. And I said, now, if I really give a real curve of only 9 points, there'll be 1 A, a few B's, and the rest of them a bunch of C's, D's, and F's. So I'm not putting a sharp curve on. With 20 points of fill up like this. So I did not make a mistake. According to the Scantron machine, you actually got a grade of 120 with the curve. Yeah, so you're welcome. Yeah, I mean, I'm supposed to say this quietly. I don't care who grade this.
It was like
120 out of 100 possible. Yeah, I mean, I'm not supposed to tell that the whole class. In this case, I slipped out. I'm not supposed to say that out loud. But your classmates. Yes. Which question is it? Oh, number 1, Bering Strait. I mentioned that. I'll tell you what, the Bering Strait is the, right here. That little bit of land that separates Alaska from Siberia. And supposedly the American Indians came across the Bering Strait. That's how they got into the New World. Now, I don't believe it in No America, but that's what your book says. This is the Bering Strait, right here. Is that, I mean, does that answer your question? As a strait is a narrow body of water between two bigger bodies of water. That's why it's called a strait. I mean, there's another word for strait, like a line that doesn't curve. That's a strait. But this is another kind of strait. A narrow, yeah, narrow body. I mean, yeah, where's another? Oh, there's a strait right here. This is the Strait of Gibraltar. A really narrow body of water between two bigger bodies of water. This is the Strait, I believe, of Hormuz or something like that. I mean, you know, we have a few of them around here. So the Bering Strait. Okay, what else?
So, the next
It's just, yeah, that's what you just said.
Oh, if possible. Most of these questions, I mean, I want you to say, this is China, this is India, this is, give something that resembles a location. In other words, did this person live in North America? Did this person live in Mexico?
That's the actual
Did this
list.
person live, if it's a person, where did he live?
Yeah.
If it's a religion, where was it practiced?
Yeah.
Where possible, any place that's possible, give a location. Yeah, if there's, now some things, like Islam, I mean, that does, well, yeah, Islam has location. It's found mostly here in the Middle East.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Location, when possible. All right.
I have to make up test 3 or
When do you want to make it up?
you have class on Wednesday.
I have a class on Wednesday at 4. I have one today at 4.
I have to go to work, so I
Oh.
can't do it today.
Okay,
So I'll probably
you're going to
be
come
on-
in, you're going to come into my class, 4 o'clock class, I can do it 4.
Oh, okay.
All right,
And
sounds good.
then also.
And I'll be looking for you.
The 9th through the 18th, I'll be in Thailand, so I'll make sure I turn in my.
Turn the paper before you go.
early.
Yeah,
And
turn
do
in
you,
your
do we
paper.
have a test through that week,
The 9th through the 18th, no, let's see, April 9th through 18th. Yes, on April 11th, it's test 5.
Okay, so can I just
Yeah,
make that up?
you can make that up, yeah,
Okay.
April 11th, test 5.
All right.
Okay, I'm lucky if you had facilities. All right,
Okay.
yeah. Let me tell you, come on in. Come on in. Yeah, what you need?
Is there like a word count or page number?
1,000 words. And again, the computer can count it. And that's one of the first things I check. Again, because turn it into count words. 1,000
Can we
words.
turn it in Dropbox?
No.
Turn it in.com?
www.turnitin.com. Not on Dropbox, turnitin.com.